Lo sapevi che il 96% della vita sulla Terra è stato cancellato in un periodo relativamente breve e i dinosauri non sono stati i primi a dominare il pianeta. Prima di loro c'erano mostri marini giganteschi. Prima ancora, creature strane come uscite da un film di fantascienza. E prima di tutto questo, solo minuscoli batteri negli oceani oscuri. Ma ecco la parte più inquietante. Se anche solo un singolo evento del passato fosse andato leggermente diverso, tu non esisteresti. 1,35 miliardi di anni di evoluzione della Terra sono una sequenza di catastrofi, collisioni, estinzioni e rinascite. Supercontinenti che si uniscono e poi si spezzano. Oceani che bollono. Asteroidi infuocati che precipitano dallo spazio. Cosa ha permesso alla vita di sopravvivere a tutto questo e perché? Dopo miliardi di anni di caos, proprio l'essere umano è qui oggi. In questo video scoprirai come è comparsa la prima forma di vita, l'esplosione cambriana che ha cambiato tutto, perché il 96% delle specie è scomparso, come un asteroide ha distrutto i dinosauri e perché quella catastrofe ha aperto la strada a noi. Questa non è solo la storia della Terra, è la tua storia. Il viaggio di 3,5 miliardi di anni inizia adesso. Life appeared on our planet more than 3.5 billion years ago. The planet experienced periods in which the ice extended to the equator, as well as suffocating periods and no ice in the poles. The jungles of these geological eras have become the home of reindeer today. The sea level rose 200 meters above the current level, turning the continents into archipelagos. Then it descended 100 meters below the current level, creating areas of land that are now submerged. The continents approached and then moved away. The animals 600 million years old look like they came out of a science fiction movie. Although dinosaurs are the undisputed stars of the Mesozoic period, it is often forgotten that 400 million years before their existence, a multitude of animals preceded them. In one way or another, their world changed as a result of climate change, the lack of food or the arrival of new predators. Most of the species failed to adapt and went extinct. However, they left their footprints on Earth as they persisted in the fossils. Thus, these remains provide a detailed image of what life was like on Earth before the dinosaurs. Dear traveler, good morning. Today we are going on a journey to the heart of the Proterozoic and Paleozoic eras, that is more than 400 million years ago, before the reign of the dinosaurs. A journey to the past to discover amazing and exciting animals. A journey in which you will discover our planet, devastated by the worst episodes of extinction you have ever known. But before we go on another incredible adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Thank you all, and have a nice trip. We go back in time long before the era of the dinosaurs, when the Earth was a huge ball of snow completely frozen, covered with glaciers from the poles to the tropics. When volcanic eruptions produced large amounts of CO2, a greenhouse effect was created that allowed the planet to warm up. The ice melted and different Earth masses came together to form a supercontinent called Rondinia. It is surrounded by a single ocean called Myrovia. Scientists use the appearance and disappearance of animals to divide the historical periods of the evolution of the Earth. These periods are divided in turn into eras. In total, there are 4 eras that cover the last 635 million years. Let's start our journey in the Ediacardian period, between 635 and 542 million years ago. This marks the end of the late Proterozoic era and the beginning of the history of aquatic fauna. At the bottom of Myrovia, the bacteria and microbes brought by the rain began to come to life. In 1946, the Australian geologist Rex Prick was having lunch on the hills of Ediacara in Australia. Suddenly, he noticed strange jelly-shaped footprints on rocks that were 600 million years old. He had just made one of the most important fossil discoveries of all time. the Dickinsonia. Paleontologists believe that the oldest animal that lived on the sea was found in Australia and Russia about 560 million years ago. The Dickinsonia, a soft-bodied animal, was oval and was covered with grooves formed by the sections of its body. Although it could grow up to 4 meters long, it was as thick as a sheet of smoking paper. It was only a few centimeters thick. Was it an animal, a plant, or a mushroom? To answer this question, it was necessary to wait until 2018 for a team of paleontologists to detect specific fat molecules from multicellular animals in Australian fossils. However, this discovery is not enough to certify that the Dickinsonia belongs to the animal kingdom. It could also be related to jellyfish or sea anemones, or even be a flattened giant worm. In 1957, 3 English scholars found a leaf-shaped fossil in a forest in Leicestershire that they took to a geologist at the local university. Called Charnia masoni, it looks like a fern. The discovery of other Charnia fossils in formerly submerged rocks indicates that it was not a member of the plant kingdom. This animal lived in deep waters, where the lack of light did not allow the development of plants. Since its discovery, other specimens have been recovered in Canadian, Russian, and Australian rocks. Charnia did not have a skeleton or shell, and its body was soft. Most of the fossils are about 20 centimeters long. However, a species related to it, Charnia gardi, of which there is evidence in Canada, was up to 2 meters long. It is assumed that it was anchored to the bottom of the sea with a disc or spigot and grew like a leaf on its stem. Since it had no mouth or intestine, it probably fed by filtering or absorbing water nutrients, as its modern relatives, the crinoids, do. Another fossil from the Ediacaran period also comes from the hills of Ediacara. Named Kimberella, this animal measured up to 15 centimeters long, 5 centimeters wide, and 4 centimeters tall. It had a single wide and muscular foot to move. A soft but robust shell was used to retract its soft body in the event of a threat. In some rocks, Kimberella's footprints show a dentition. Could it be the ancestor of the snail? It has all the characteristics that we find today in this animal, and it can be clearly stated that Kimberella is the oldest mollusk. Still, in the hills of Ediacara, paleontologists discovered other fossils, including the Tribrachidium. This animal lived in shallow waters, with a diameter of 4 centimeters. It buried itself at the bottom of the sea, leaving only a few millimeters of its semi-spherical body. At the top, 3 grooves started from the center and curved towards the edges like the Triskobreton. These created vortices that channeled the water to 3 wells at the top of the animal. In this way, it could extend food particles. According to researchers, the closest relatives of the Tribrachidium today could be the anemones or the starfish. The first animal with a shell was called Claudina, and it seemed to be very extensive. Fossils have been found in limestone rocks in Africa, Asia, North and South America, Europe, and Antarctica. Its shell consisted of a pile of open cones that formed a tube that corresponded to its habitat. The largest specimens are 15 centimeters long and 6 millimeters wide. How did it feed? What was its way of life? Did it land at the bottom of the sea, or was it able to bury itself there? All this remains a mystery. In any case, the way these marine animals fed probably clarified the water and enriched its oxygen content. This favored the appearance of more mobile and energetic animals, as well as the development of their eyes. The holes drilled in some shells of the Claudina suggest attempts to prey on one animal over another. Thus, the scenario is prepared for the great confrontation that took place between predators and prey in the Paleozoic era. At the end of the Proterozoic era, The Rondinia, the supercontinent of the time, was divided into several continents. First, around 560 million years ago, 3 continents were separated: Aurentia, Siberia, and the immense Gondwanaland. Aurentia includes present-day North America, without New England or Terra Nova, but with the north of Ireland and Scotland. Siberia corresponds to present-day Russia. Gondwanalandia includes Africa, South America, Antarctica, India, China, Southeast Asia, Australia, and Southern Europe. 520 million years ago, a new continent, called the Baltic Sea, separated from Rondinia. It was similar to Northern Europe. Little by little, the opening of a new ocean, the Petus, separated Aurentia from the Baltic Sea and Gondwana. The Cambrian period begins, marking the beginning of the Paleozoic era and the appearance of a new, exclusively marine life. The most famous fossil deposit of the Cambrian period is located in British Columbia, Canada. It is the Burgess schist, discovered in 1909 by paleontologist Charles Doolittle Walcott. This deposit has caused exceptionally well-preserved remains of a rich invertebrate fauna that lived in the Middle Cambrian 520 million years ago. If you had dived in the Cambrian in search of macroscopic fauna, you would have come across Lucigenia. In 1977, a strange fossil caught the attention of British paleontologist Simon Conway Morris. It was extremely thin, measuring only 2 centimeters in length. It had a soft, spiky trunk of thorns and was supported by 10 pairs of high legs, as if walking on planks. The 7 pairs of hind legs were equipped with claws that had to be used to move forward. The 3 pairs of front legs, which are longer and thinner, seemed to be covered with a kind of feathers. Were they sensory organs, or did they have the function of retaining food suspended in the water and taking it to the mouth surrounded by teeth? The second hypothesis seems plausible, because the opening in the head is covered with thorns. In addition, further back, there is a set of teeth in the shape of a needle in the throat. It is therefore assumed that the food was chewed once and swallowed a second time in the throat. Thanks to the latest advances in electron microscopy, the Lucigenia fossil also reveals a pair of dark spots on its head. They may correspond to the eyes. Thanks to these scientific advances that allowed a more precise description of Lucigenia, scientists related to the onychophores, a group represented by the peripatus vermiform animals that live in tropical forests. They are relatives of arthropods, among which are crustaceans and insects. Another unusual animal in the group of arthropods intrigues scientists. This is Wiwaxia. The first fossilized specimens were found in the Burgess Basin, but others have been recorded in China, Russia, Australia, and the Czech Republic. Its ovoid body, 5 centimeters long, was covered by 8 rows of superimposed plates called sclerites. The sclerites acted as a shell to escape the attacks of predators and were topped off by 2 rows of piers up to 5 centimeters high. In addition, the scales of this natural armor, loaded with microscopic structures, reflected light like the back of a beetle. This was enough to dazzle and dissuade the attackers from approaching. Wiwaxia was at least hospitallary, as the fossil exam shows that she had shells similar to those of the clams on her back. Therefore, it is assumed that Wiwaxia simply landed on the seabed and never dug. Her food consisted of bacteria found at the bottom of the ocean. To tell the truth, specialists find it difficult to agree on the place that Wiwaxia occupies in the tree of life. Some point to her close relatives among modern marine worms. Others suggest that since her oral organ resembles that of a snail, it is her ancestor. There are also those who believe that she is neither a worm nor a mollusk, but a representative of a different group that has already disappeared. Among the arthropods, the star of these geological eras is still the tribalite. They were omnipresent in the seas of the Cambrian and occupied all kinds of habitat from the coral reefs to the bottom of the ocean for more than 270 million years. To date, more than 20,000 species have been recorded. There are tribalites of all shapes and sizes, from the size of a nail to 70 centimeters. Most species measure between 3 and 10 centimeters. Her body was divided into 3 parts, both long and wide. It has a head with 3 lobes, of which it takes its name, a thorax and a tail. The head consisted of a central part bordered by 2 cheeks that housed the eyes, composed of hundreds of facets similar to those of a libellule. The body was divided into other segments, each of which had 2 attachments, such as antennas, oral organs, or legs. This body pattern differs from one species to another. Some had thorns that stretched and twisted in strange shapes, while others had eyes resting on stems on their bodies. Most wandered the seabed in search of food, and their morphology gave them a great ability to live in their aquatic environment. Their diets were varied. Predators, scavengers, lime-eaters, or even filterers. It is believed that their closest relatives are spiders and scorpions. A distant cousin of the tribulite, the morella, was nicknamed the crab of Encage by paleontologist Charles Doolittle Walcott, who discovered it in the Burgese Basin. They abounded in the waters of the Cambrico, having found more than 25,000 specimens. It measures up to 2.5 centimeters and has 2 long extensions at the top of the head, which go backwards, which gives it a saw-like appearance. Below, 2 pairs of thin antennas in the mouth probably allow it to orient itself in the sandy bottom. Another pair of mobile appendages at the bottom of the head, more robust and hairy, may have had a propulsion function to help it move. The rest of the body is made up of between 17 and 26 segments. How did the morella feed? Several hypotheses have been raised. It could have been a hunter and a carter, or it filtered the water through its multiple legs, equipped with thread-shaped excrescences. The mystery remains. Let's continue our discovery of strange marine creatures of the Cambrico with the cephalopod Nectocaris teryx. Although little is known about this animal, the fossils collected in the Burgese Basin provide invaluable information about the anatomy and lifestyle of this primitive creature. Its cylindrical, soft and flattened body, seen from above, measured between 2 and 5 centimeters. It had 2 lateral dorsal fins, similar to a striped and squid hybrid. This probably allowed it to swim fast and agilely through the water. It also had 2 long tentacles that came out of its rigid head. The Nectocaris is a peculiar creature, as it has a pair of rod-shaped eyes. From the base of its mouth, a kind of flexible cone opens to an internal cavity that contains a pair of branches. This chimney resembles the siphon, a tubular organ, of today's cephalopods, which they use to swim backwards. Scientists assume that the Nectocaris used it to propel itself in the water. It probably fed on small organisms such as plankton and bacteria, while living in shallow waters near the coast. All these anatomical characteristics are consistent with the hypothesis that the Nectocaris pteryx is the ancestor of octopuses and squids. Here is one of the most fascinating animals of the Cambrian or Pavinia. Its anatomy is quite strange. Its soft, segmented body, 7 centimeters long, gives it the appearance of a shrimp. It had 5 eyes resting on small stems, 2 in front and 3 behind, as well as a flexible proboscis that ended in a kind of claw that it probably used to take food to its mouth. In the absence of powerful jaws, it had to feed on soft food, extracting worms from the ground. Pavinia did not have legs. The 15 segments of the body were bordered by articulated lobes that may have been used to crawl and swim. The caudal fin in the shape of a fan looks a bit like a lobster. This would have helped it to move and navigate. Many scientists saw a unique specimen in Pavinia. However, the meticulous comparison of numerous living and fossil species has led researchers to relate it to other animals, segmented by soft bodies and even by phytoarthropods. Now let's move on to the sea monster of the Cambrian Anomalocaris. Its body resembles that of a giant shrimp as it measures up to 1 meter long. It was a formidable hunter, the largest aquatic predator of this time. Armed with spikes, the oral organs hang from the head. Its round and flattened mouth, formed by plates, resembles that of a camera. Its favorite prey, probably tribalites, as paleontologists have observed bite marks on some specimens corresponding to its jaw. However, paleontologist James Whitey Hagedorn suggested that this predator could not eat hard-shelled prey. So, Anomalocaris may have fed on tribalites during the period of mutation, but it was certainly more of a threat to worms. From Greenland to Australia, several dozen specimens have been found on the rocks of the Cambrian. As the shape of the mouth varies from one species to another, they are supposed to differ in their diet. Some seem to have specialized in predation, while others search the seabed or in the filtered water to capture tiny creatures. With a diameter of 2 centimeters, the eyes composed of a rod-shaped structure were as large as those of any insect and had up to 16,000 facets. Even after the appearance of fish, Anomalocaris remained one of the largest marine creatures until the Ordovician period. The Picaia gracilens, with a diameter of 1 inch, was not particularly large as it did not measure more than 5 centimeters. It is one of the oldest known species of the group of the chordados, to which all vertebrates belong, including the human being. Picaia looked like an eel. It did not have a skeleton, but a notochord, a flexible cartilaginous structure that ran through its fusiform body like a spine. Like 100 myomas, small muscular axes separated by connective tissue allow the Picaia to swim wavering. The viscera of some specimens contain fossilized mud, indicating that it touched the seabed. The presence of muscles, nerves, and blood vessels suggests a distant relationship with fish reptiles and other skeletal animals. However, some aspects of its morphology remain enigmatic. For example, the 2 long tentacles at the top of the head and the multiple pairs of small appendages just below the ventral part. Millicunmingia also belongs to the group of the chordados. Smaller than the Picaia, its body is not larger than a clip. Its fossils come from the Maotianshan Basin in Zhejiang, south of China. It looks like a fish with fins, muscles, skull, and even gills. Many researchers consider it the first known vertebrate, although it does not have a bone structure, but a soft cartilaginous skeleton. Thus, during the Cambrian, life took off in an unprecedented way. This period was a trampoline for the explosion of the diversity of aquatic animals observed during the Ordovician period. The Ordovician period spans 65 million years, beginning 500 million years ago. It is the period of the largest continental fragmentation of the Paleozoic, the start of the ocean's closure. Lapithus approaches Arentia, the Baltic Sea. Then the Caledonian orogeny took place, which created the ancient massifs of Europe and North America, including the Appalachians. The opening of the Arctic Ocean separates Avalonia from Gondwana. Avalonia, thus called by the mythical island of Avalon, where Excalibur was forged, the sword of King Arthur, included England, Wales, the southeast of Ireland, the north of France, New Scotland, and New England. The Sea of Torquist separates the Baltic Sea from Avalonia. During this period, a new explosion of animal diversity occurred. The fossil record shows a growing number of deep-water species planktonic animals that swam in the open sea and well-equipped predators to capture them. Built by sponges and other creatures, the reefs grew and multiplied, giving shelter to more animals. At the same time, some took their first steps on land on short excursions out of the water, leaving their footprints on the shore. The vegetation of the time consisted mainly of moss and lichens. Much of the primitive fauna lived in the shallow seas near the coast. But for any animal that could swim far enough in the sea, the open ocean offered a vast territory, new food resources, and perhaps fewer predators. Along with crustaceans and other arthropods, the Nautiloides is a mollusk cousin of the squid and octopus. The fossils found on the rocks of the Ordovician, 470 million years old, show that they were present all over the world. They are animals that gradually adapted to life in deep waters. It is believed that the first Nautiloides were planktivores that climbed and descended into the water, filling the cavities of their shell with gas and emptying them later. To do this, they changed the chemical concentration of their body fluids. The increase in concentration transfers water from the shell to the body. This causes the shell to fill with gas. When the amount of gas in the shell increases, the animal does the same, and vice versa. The Nautiloides then became more mobile. They moved, projecting a stream of water through a hole near the head, and hunted with their tentacles, which carried the food to their hard beaks. Most had shells only about 10 centimeters long, but others were huge and could reach up to 6 meters long. At that time, they were at the top of the food chain. Damaged fossil shells show that the Nautiloides probably attacked each other. The traces of color preserved in some fossils even suggest that some species practice camouflage. In fact, in the upper half of the shell, the gray and brown stripes allow the animal to blend in with the dark waters. Imagine a giant waterfowl, and you will have a good idea of how the first vertebrates were. Of them, Shaka bambaspis yambieri is one of the oldest and best known. He is often considered the pioneer of full skeleton animals. With a maximum length of 25 centimeters, his head is especially striking, with bone shields at the top and bottom. They probably protected it from predators, especially large invertebrates. The rest of the body was covered in long scales. He had no jaws and had to pick up or suck the food from the bottom of the water and then crush it in his throat. The eyes were located between two small nostrils, and the mouth was armed with very thin plates. Shaka bambaspis lived in shallow waters near the shore. Some fossils have scratches on the belly made by scraping the seabed. Today, the largest animals in the sea are the vertebrates, that is whales and sharks, though some deep-water squids compete closely with them. But hundreds of millions of years ago, huge specimens dominated the seas, including him. With a body that could reach up to 180 meters, he was related to the giant Eurypterids. Other species, however, were smaller, only about 50 centimeters. Most lived in shallow waters, but his appearance at the same time in points of the planet, separated by vast oceans, shows that they were perfect swimmers. His sight must have been excellent because he had a pair of gigantic lateral eyes, in addition to a second pair of smaller eyes in the center of the head. His body was built to swim, and his flat tail was probably used as fins to propel himself. Despite its large size and fearsome appearance, the Pterogothus anglicus did not survive the catastrophic massive extinction that ended his aquatic reign. Aquatic ancestors of the 1,000 feet, the Euthecinoides, are arthropods with an external skeleton, a pointed tail, and an articulated body, with up to 28 pairs of legs. Of the size of a large shrimp of about 10 centimeters, they are more like a cross between a lobster and a piglet. The rocks that contain the oldest known fossils of Euthecinoides date from the end of the Cambrian, Scientists suggest that they were the first animals that ventured into land where the coast was full of microbes and bacteria. A meal served on a tray if you could reach it with the low tide. In addition, venturing out of the water offered an escape route from the attacks of predators. At the end of the Ordovician, there was a great extinction, when 85% of the existing species disappeared. It affected both organisms that live in the background, such as tribolites, echinoderms, and brachiopods, as well as pelagic forms such as nautiloids. This massive extinction has been related to the glaciation that occurred at this time. The South Pole was then located in present-day Niger, and much of Gondwana was covered by a thick layer of ice twice as large as the current layer of ice in Antarctica. As a result, the sea level dropped 50 meters, drying out the shallow seas, where life previously thrived. In addition, an anoxic event, that is an extreme decrease in oxygen levels in the seawater, destabilized the ecosystem of marine life. What used to be an ocean of life is now an ocean of desolation. This crisis lasted between 1 and 2 million years before giving way to the Silurian period, 435 million years ago. At the beginning of this third Paleozoic period, which began 444 million years ago and lasted more than 28 million years, the thaw of the polar caps caused a general rise in the level of the oceans and the shallow seas that covered the continental platforms. After the closure of the Turkish Ocean, the mass of land in Avalonia joined the masses of land in Laurentia and the Baltic Sea. Thus, the continent of the Old Red Sandstone was formed, abbreviated CVGR, which is now called in various ways Laureuropa, Euramerica, or Laurussia. The huge continent of Gondwana was separated from the CVGR by the Arctic Ocean and the Paleothetis. The Silurian period marks the beginning of the era of fish, with the development of the agnatic vertebrates, that is, fish without jaws which have an external bone armor called ostracoderms. However, there are also vertebrates with jaws, known as gnatostomas, which appeared in the Ordovician period. It was in the Silurian period when the terrestrialization of invertebrates took place, that is, oligochaetes, arthropods, and gastropods. The oldest plant macrofossils date from the Silurian period, but are scarce. After the massive extinctions of the end of the Ordovician period, life reproliferated and diversified. Coral reefs are numerous. In the insular arches that border the Panthalassa and the Paleothetis, as well as in the depths of the shallow seas. The widespread warm climate allows them to extend far beyond the intertropical zone. Corals are mainly tetracoralliarids, also known as rough and tabulated corals. The emblematic animals of the Silurian are the Eurypterids. Already present in the Ordovician, their history continued and never diversified so much in shape and size. The most important event among vertebrates was the appearance of the jaw, which was formed from the second branching arc of the gnat. The first vertebrates with jaws or gnatostomas were the acanthoids with their spiny fins, and the placoderms whose front part of the body was enclosed in a bone shell. The placoderm was the first vertebrate with mobile jaws and teeth appearing in the lower Silurian. It also introduced a pair of fins, which later evolved to become the limbs of terrestrial vertebrates. The specimens of a species 380 million years old found in the Goyo Formation, a fossil settlement in Western Australia, contained fossilized embryos. The placoderm is therefore one of the first known vertebrates that has produced fully developed young instead of laying eggs. But the most striking and strange feature of the placoderm are the bone plates that cover the head and the upper part of the body. This armor shows that the Silurian seas were a ruthless environment in which the fish ate each other, not to mention the threat of invertebrate predators such as nautiloids and sea scorpions. The placoderm awaited its prey stalking on the seabed or hunting in the open sea. Dunkleosteus stands out as the largest placoderm, reaching 6 meters in length and with jaws capable of exerting a force of 500 kilograms. Other specimens, on the other hand, fed on marine plants. For example, the Titanictis, one of the most impressive, with its 8 meters in length and its weight of 1 ton, lacked teeth. It probably filtered plankton in suspension in the water like the current whale shark. However, the giant placoderms were rare, and most of them measured between 30 centimeters and 1 meter. Placoderms are found all over the world, living in fresh water and in the sea. When they died out at the end of the Bonic period, they left the oceans to 2 groups: Skeletopus fish, to which most current fish belong, and which include the ancestors of terrestrial vertebrates and soft-shelled sharks and rays. According to the fossils of Acanthodontes sharks, along with their cousins, rays are descendants of this group of Natosteus vertebrates that appeared about 400 million years ago. Acanthoids are characterized by having long bone thorns on the front of their pectoral fins, but also on the dorsal and anal fins. Their bodies were covered with small quadrangular scales. Like sharks, they had a heterocircle tail, that is, with 2 unequal lobes. Some acanthoids were predators who used their large eyes to detect their prey. Others lacked teeth and were content with filtering the water. These predators flourished all over the world, colonizing seas and rivers, until they died out in the Permian about 250 million years before our era. The invasion of the continents continued with the appearance of the first terrestrial arthropods and larger plants such as Coccinea. Terrestrial life is limited to a narrow strip of wetlands around rivers and lagoons. The best candidates for the title of pioneer terrestrial animals are the ancestors of the current milpees and Escolopendras, the group of myriapods. Pneumodesmus pneumani was a relatively small creature that measured just over 2 centimeters long. However, its most striking feature was its large number of legs. It had up to 40 pairs. The holes that run through its body allow it to breathe, providing oxygen to its cells. They also show that the animal lived on land. The Paleophonos is one of the oldest known scorpions. Although its exact size is unknown, it probably did not measure more than 8 centimeters. This small size may have been an adaptation to the lack of food available at that time. Its ovoid body was flat, and its long tail had a sting at the end. The most striking feature of the Paleophonos are its large claws. It is possible that they were used for capture and defense, and could have posed a serious threat to smaller prey. As for vegetation, a type of primitive plant appeared, the Coccinea. The size of the Coccinea varies from a few centimeters to a meter in height. Microscopic analysis reveals a functional vascular system. This allowed it to transport water and soil nutrients through the stem, thus ensuring a constant supply of water. Therefore, the Coccinea could easily adapt to hot and dry periods and survive them. Stems of Coccinea fossils have also been found. They are small holes in the wall of the cuticle that allow the exchange of gases with the cells. Therefore, they are its respiratory system, without which it could not have developed. Without roots, leaves, or flowers, it consists of fine and branched stems. The stems end in a trumpet-shaped structure called sporangium, which serves to spread the spores outside the plant to colonize the surroundings. These small plants dominated the continents for 40 million years. They were an important milestone in the evolution of terrestrial plants. Among its descendants are some of the best-known current plants, such as ferns, mosses, and flower plants. In addition, By spreading oxygen in the atmosphere and stabilizing the soils, they also contributed to the arrival of terrestrial animals. The Devonic period is located between the Silurian and the Carboniferous. This period extends from 418 to 359 million years ago. The Devonic period is marked by the disappearance of the Arctic Ocean, which allowed the supercontinent Gondwana to continue its slow drift to Eurasia. In this period, the transition of fish to tetrapods occurred, animals with 4 limbs and a neck, as well as the appearance of hexapods, which group insects and arthropods with 3 pairs of legs. Apart from the Panthalassa, most of the Paleo-Ocean inherited from the lower Paleozoic closed during the Devonic, giving rise to a pre-Pangea paleogeographic configuration. The first forests were established in the equatorial regions of Eurasia, participating in the photosynthetic activity that allowed the development of the ozone layer. All these events took place in a generally warm climate, responsible for the development of oxidized silica sediments. The old red sandstone and carbonated rocks in which the arreciifal formations proliferated. The uniformly warm climate of the beginning of the Devonic favored the development of the arcaicos. The building animals are invertebrates that live in colonies called stromatoporas. The tabulated corals and the terracurrent corals of the Silurian period still cover the bottom of the ocean. The placoderms continue to dominate the ecosystems. The dunkleosteos, for example, are a formidable predator and a threat to the giant eurypterids. Although they were already present at this time, the sharks were not yet the supreme predators of the seas. Several representatives of the Skama fish groups joined them, namely actinopterids, acanthoids, and sarcopterids. The graptolites, classified as algae sponges, hydrozoa, bryozoa, and pterobranchios, disappeared at the end of the lower Devonic. Only a family of bentonite graptolites passed to the Carboniferous. The seabed is still dominated by branchiopods, of which only relics remain in our current seas. The bivalve mollusks became diversified and abundant seabed in the shallow waters of the coast, as is still the case today. The large nautiloid mollusks begin to decline, but give rise to the ammonoids omnipresent in the Mesozoic seas. The echinoderms, mainly crinoidae or sea lilies, form true beds of marine herbs at the local level. The fish of the Devonic can be divided into 2 main groups: the agnatos fish without jaws and the gnatostomos or fish with jaws. Of these 2 groups, the agnatos were the ones who had the most difficulties to survive the great biological crisis of the Devonic ends. Of the 6 groups known at this time, 4 were extinguished. Of those who survive today, there are only a few species left, such as the lampreys and the myxinos. Among the gnatostomos, the destinies were diverse. On the one hand, the last acanthoids disappeared after the Devonic like the last placoderms. On the other hand, sharks and rays have prospered to this day. Several subgroups of sarcopterygians appeared in the Devonic, and one of them was the origin of the first tetrapods, a remarkable evolutionary success with 29,000 current species, not counting all those that have been extinguished. Today, only a dozen species of fish, along with the coelacanths and lungfish, belong to the sarcopterygians. The actinopterygians, the fish with ray fins, are an undeniable evolutionary success, with about 29,000 species that currently travel the waters of the world, making them the largest group of vertebrates. The Eusthenopteron was one of the sarcopterygians that was able to conquer the earth. It had a pair of pelvic fins and a pair of fleshy pectoral fins, each connected to the body by a single bone. These bones are analogous to the bone limbs of terrestrial tetrapods, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. In these fish with fleshy fins, the swimming bladder is modified to allow air breathing. The bone limbs were used to row in the water, but also to drag along the shore. All indicates that the Eustenopteron could have reached 1.8 meters in length. However, most paleontologists agree that it never came out of the water. The Tiktaalik, thanks to certain aspects of its anatomy, seems to be close to terrestrial animals. It was discovered on the island of Ellesmere in the Canadian Arctic archipelago. It measures up to 2.5 meters and has a flattened head that can rotate thanks to a mobile neck. The holes, which could be assimilated to the nostrils, would probably allow it to breathe on land. Its fins with strong bones and a joint comparable to that of a doll could have helped it get up. Equipped in this way, it could probably move in shallow waters, but also travel short distances along the coast. Like the crocodile, it had to cross rivers and swamps using its powerful fins and its mobile neck to hunt other fish, which it crushed with its sharp teeth. It is assumed that Tiktaalik did not stay out of the water for long, based on the prints left on the rocks where its fossils were found. The transition from fish to tetrapods is one of the key events in the history of terrestrial life, which led to the colonization of the Earth's surface by the vertebrates. However, in order for this change to occur, two major problems had to be solved: to be able to breathe out of the water and move while walking. Acanthoostega and Ichthyostega are among the vertebrates with the oldest known legs. Therefore, they provide essential clues to this mystery. The Acanthoostega is a bridge between species of fish with robust fins in the shape of limbs like those of Tiktaalik, and the first animals capable of living on land. The fossils of Acanthoostega measure about 60 centimeters. It had a flat head gills to breathe in the water and a large caudal fin ideal for swimming. But it also had lungs that allowed it to breathe air on the surface. Judged by its morphology and by the aquatic plants fossilized in the Greenland landscapes where it was found, it lived in shallow rivers and swamps. It rode with its legs among the vegetation in search of small prey. Its palmed feet ended in 8 fingers, but the lack of joints means that the legs were probably trying to support their weight on the ground. As for Ichthyostega, it is characterized by being a great cousin of the Acanthoostega, as it can overcome the meter. It also had to live mainly in the water, as witnessed by its powerful caudal fin and its gills. However, it seems to be better adapted to life on land, since its ribs and 7-fingered limbs are more robust and therefore can better withstand the weight. However, it could not walk like the current terrestrial vertebrates. It may have had to use its front legs to crawl like a seal. As for the rear legs, they probably served as additional support. This development of terrestrial and aquatic life was interrupted by the third great biological crisis in the history of the Earth. 374 million years ago, a new mass extinction occurred in the transition between the Frasnian and the Flaminian 2 stages of the Devonian period. While the mass extinction of the Ordovician was a unique and sudden event, the mass extinction of the Devonian was a series of events that lasted 3 million years. There was a climate warming in which the temperature reached 30 degrees. In addition, numerous extraterrestrial impacts weakened the biosphere. In the bowels of the Earth under present-day Siberia, an ocean of magma is boiling, about to explode. A giant feather is forming that detaches from the magma, ready to explode through the terrestrial crust. The overheated gases are expelled from the depths of the Earth. The water boils. Submarine earthquakes destroy reefs. Eruptions are disproportionate. Thousands of tons of molten rock are poured into the oceans. At the end of the Frasnian, a shortage of oxygen occurred all over the world. This phenomenon was called the Kelwasser event. When molten lava comes into contact with seawater, It generates toxic substances such as metals, silver, gold, chrome, iron, magnesium, and others. The ocean is contaminated and marine life is devastated. Gases are released into the atmosphere, releasing massive amounts of carbon dioxide, and little by little the air is filled with greenhouse gases. Temperatures rise and ocean currents stop. The water reaches more than 30 degrees in Ecuador. It is desolation. The aquatic environment is dying. 250,000 years after the first eruption, the Earth continues to pour magma. With the atmosphere saturated with carbon dioxide, the vegetation exploded and invaded the surface of the Earth. The leaves have been falling for thousands of years, rotting on the ground and forming the first layer of humus on the planet. This soil, rich in nutrients, is dragged by the rains and flows into the seas. Absorbed by the algae, they grow uncontrollably, stealing all the oxygen and suffocating aquatic life. The coasts are infested and saturated with plants. These eruptions, which until now occurred in the sea, are beginning to occur on land. The air is filled with sulfur dioxide, methane, and carbon dioxide. Enormous eruptions occur. Gigantic clouds of ash are thrown into the atmosphere several kilometers high. The planet empties out of its bowels. It is chaos on Earth. The sky darkens. The burning ash falls on the continents. Fires erupt all over the world. The sun no longer penetrates the atmosphere. It is the volcanic winter. Temperatures of around 30 degrees fall to 20 degrees, and the plankton that forms the base of the food chain disappears. The eggs of the fish are decimated. It is a massacre. Salvation came from the hands of the trees that produce oxygen. The temperatures ended up stabilizing. The seasons reappeared and life diversified again. This extinction took between 50 and 70% of the species. At the beginning of the Carboniferous, the continents, La Russia and Gondwana, were formed into a single continent, the Little Pangaea. To the east, the ocean that exchanged the Little Pangaea is called Prototetis. These continental masses are surrounded by the superocean Pantalassa. This movement of the tectonic plates raises the level of the oceans, drowning a large number of plants. In the seas, more and more fish appear with thorns. However, in the oceans predominate the echinoderms and crinoidae that populate the bottom. In the immense and lush swamps, in addition to the arthropods that reigned, the tetrapods and amphibians that appeared in the Devonian period, as well as the first reptiles evolved. On land, the ferns of the Devonian were giving way to the trees of bark and seed. During fires or floods, these trees and plants were buried. Then they decompose, thus preserved under the organic matter in growth. This vegetal matter, buried in depth and heated for millions of years, turns into carbon. This process is called carbonization. 330 million years ago, the conditions for the formation of carbon were so favorable that the period was called Carboniferous. The masters of the Carboniferous jungles were a group of vascular plants, the most common of which is called lepidodendron. This majestic plant, which can climb up to 30 meters high, had a trunk of 1 meter in diameter. Initial growth was ascending fast and without branches. When this unique and huge bud reached the top, the tree opened into a beautiful crown of branches, whose tips carried cones that contained the spores. Another terrestrial plant of the Carboniferous period, Glossopteris, was found in the rocks of South America, South Africa, Madagascar, India, and Australia. Although this plant is one of the main components of carbon, little is known about it. It was a woody plant with a trunk of 80 centimeters in diameter. Therefore, it is conceivable that Glossopteris can also be up to 30 meters high. The Carboniferous was a time of giant insects. Large-sized birds, cockroaches as large as mice and scorpions, more than 50 centimeters long. But the gold medal goes to Arthropleura, the largest invertebrate of this time. Although no complete fossil has yet been found, scientists agree that based on the study of fragments and fossil traces, it could have been up to 2 meters long and 50 centimeters wide. This relative of the modern centipede was covered by a thick and heavy shell, made of chitin plates, a hard substance found in the exoskeleton of insects. It lived in tropical swamps covered by forests of arboreal ferns and other primitive plants. As fossil mouths have not yet been found, scientists suppose it was a herbivore, since the fossil feces attributed to Arthropleura contain spores of plants. Ballina Peyton woody was found in the famous Scottish settlement of East Kirkton, inside hollow fossil tree trunks. It is conceivable that this was the last refuge that these little amphibians found to protect themselves from a fatal detachment. The morphology of Ballina Peyton is unusual, with its rounded skull and elongated body about 20 centimeters. It looks like a salamander. Its well-oxidized and robust wrists and ankles suggest a terrestrial locomotion. It has a large tympanic opening in the back of the skull, which forms a rounded window useful for detecting the sounds of the environment. It is one of the few fossil amphibians that has about 40 teeth in the upper jaw, while at the bottom there are only about 20. Therefore, its diet was carnivorous, even insectivorous. As for reptiles and lizards, the Elonomus is the oldest specimen. The first discovery of Elonomus fossils took place more than 150 years ago on the Canadian island of Nova Scotia, which during the Carboniferous period was in the tropics. These were buried inside a hollow and fossilized tree trunk. These trees grew far from the water, a sign that the Elonomus had evolved enough to spend its life on land. It lived through the forests in search of insects and millipedes. Its body was approximately 25 centimeters long, including its tail. Elonomus reveals the depths of the reptiles, and with them the appearance of the amniotic egg that allowed them to free themselves from the aquatic environment. The vertebrates were then able to colonize the earth, and the reptiles dominated it for more than 200 million years. Animal life in the Carboniferous period was also characterized by the development of giant insects. The Meganeura stands out as the ambassador of giant dragonflies. With its 30 centimeters in length and 70 centimeters in wingspan, it could be compared to the size of a modern pigeon. Flying over rivers and lakes, it fed on small insects that it could detect with its sharp eyes. So what is the huge size of the animals of the Carboniferous period? Due to the question remains a subject of debate. However, the most common explanation lies in the oxygen content of the air. Today, it is 21%, but in the Carboniferous period, it was 35%. This huge supply of oxygen came from the exuberant vegetation of the forests. As oxygen favors growth, insects, amphibians, and other invertebrates benefit from it. Lonely or colonial corals build important reefs in the warm waters of the Paleothelium. Brachiopods, equinoderms, and mollusks also developed. In this last group, goniatids are of great stratigraphic interest. While some stegocephalos experimented in the terrestrial environment, others evolved in an aquatic environment. This is the case of Crassogirius scoticus. This fossil of a giant rhinoceros was discovered in ancient mines near Edinburgh. It was up to 2 meters long. With its large skull and atrophied limbs, the Crassogirius scoticus lived in shallow fresh water like a snake. In addition, its pelvis and vertebral spine, little ossified, allowed it some flexibility. Carnivorous, with a tendency to eat fish, had several fangs inside the mouth, even in the palate. In addition, its cranial kinematics, comparable to that of snakes, witnessed that the animal could open its jaws well, thus swallowing prey much larger than it. Another crazy stegocephalus lived in the Carboniferous period. This was Spatycephalus myrus. Its skull is modest in size, about 20 centimeters long and flattened like a frisbee. At the top of the skull, there are some strange eye-shaped hollows, which are very close together. These can house eyeballs, glands, or electrosensory organs to detect prey. Another characteristic of Spatycephalus is its teeth. It has many small and fine teeth, but no fangs. Only the lower jawbone has about 120 teeth. The tips of the teeth were provided with small jaws, which indicates that it had to swallow large amounts of water or mud, which it filtered to extract small invertebrates or fish. During the late Carboniferous, the planet cooled again, and although the continent of Laurus experienced relatively mild temperatures, the same did not happen in the south. In fact, the continent of Gondwana was partially covered by ice, and this lasted about 80 million years until the beginning of the Permian. The Permian began about 295 million years ago. It lasted about 50 million years. This period will close the Paleozoic era in a very significant way. The terrestrial mass of Siberia, Kazakhstan collided with Gondwanalandia. This new collision led to the formation of Pangaea 450 million years after the rupture of Rondinia. Outside of Pangaea, there are some continental blocks. These are China in the north and south. The continental walls tended to change the climate, and as a result, the Earth acquired a new face. The ancient swampy, humid and exuberant vegetation of the Carboniferous gave way to vast arid deserts and mountain ranges, formed as a result of the collision of continental masses. During the Permian, the global level of the sea continued to descend, to reach a level close to that of our current oceans. To the east of Pangaea is the Tethys Ocean. To the west of this megacontinent is the vast and unique Panthalassa Ocean. In its center, the young continent of Pangaea, which extends almost from pole to pole, is subjected to extreme and highly variable climatic conditions. Temperatures can vary from 0 to 40 degrees Celsius in one day. The South Pole has remained frozen since glaciation began at the end of the Carboniferous period. As for the rest of the continent, the climate is rather dry and arid. This reunification of all continental masses made the terrestrial fauna quite uniform. Among the continental vertebrates, reptiles became predominant and gradually supplanted amphibians. It has witnessed the emergence of amniotes. Although the current amphibians are small, their ancestor Eryops did not go unnoticed. Its fossils were discovered in the rocks of the lower Permian of Texas and New Mexico. It is one of the main representatives of the Thamnospondylus, a group of amphibians, whose lifestyle was semi-aquatic and semi-terrestrial. Eryops can reach 2 meters in length. Its short and powerful legs were composed of 4 toes on the front and 5 on the back. The tail was modest in size and was just over 1/3 of the total length of the animal. Its skull was huge, wide and flat. Its predatory mouth showed numerous sharp teeth. It probably divided its life between the swamps and the mainland, where it could feed on small fish and terrestrial animals. However, Eryops has a great predator. This is Dimetrodon. Dimetrodon may look like a dinosaur, but it is not its ancestor. Dimetrodon belongs to the group of synapsids, which is prior to dinosaurs. It is one of the oldest superpredators which lives at the top of the food chain. Its name includes a dozen species whose size ranges between 60 centimeters and almost 5 meters. The most massive specimens could reach 300 kilograms, a weight higher than that of an adult brown bear. Its jaws have formidable ulnated teeth and sharp canines on the front. Its bite must have been very effective in killing, chopping, and devouring large amphibians and fish. It had a powerful tail and muscular and robust legs. Its back was formed by long veiled thorns that were supported on the vertebrae. Scientists have wondered for a long time about the role of this dorsal sail. Some paleontologists have suggested that the sail could have served as camouflage between the long reeds as reinforcement of the spine or to regulate body temperature. Other scientists claim that the back sail was a colorful ornament to attract couples or intimidate rivals. The truth may be a mixture of several theories. The spectacular Permian crisis occurred 252 million years ago. It was the largest ecological catastrophe in the history of the Earth. It was characterized by a drastic reduction of marine life. 96% of the species lost their lives in the process. Reef formations are back on the front line. Other animals that live near the bottom suffer a similar fate. Brachiopods are losing their diversity, as well as bryozoos and echinoderms, especially crinoids. According to scientific estimates, 75% of the species of animals and terrestrial plants have been extinct, including almost all reptiles. The causes of this extinction are still being debated. The most mentioned are the anoxia of the oceans, a great volcanism in Siberia, an important descent of the sea level, or a combination of all of them. However, the volcanic hypothesis prevails. The vast lava flows, which extend over 2 million square kilometers, would have profoundly changed the climate of the Earth. As a result, many areas became uninhabitable. Plants seem to be the first to be affected. In fact, a study of fossilized pollen grains, rocks, and sediments in Australia showed high levels of nickel for the period in question. According to researchers, it originated in Siberia, vaporized by volcanic eruptions. It spread through the atmosphere and deposited in several geographic locations. Little by little, it poisoned the plant life, which decreased. The disappearance of plants then affected the entire food chain, first herbivores and then carnivores. Nickel also contaminated the oceans, which were already suffering from global warming. In the same way, by increasing the temperature of the Earth to 50 degrees Celsius, methane from the oceans evaporated a greenhouse gas that would have aggravated this natural warming of the planet by reducing the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. The Permian-Triassic crisis thus marked the end of the Paleozoic and the beginning of the Mesozoic. Several species survived this massive extinction. Specialists call them catastrophic fauna. Among them was the Lystrosaurus, a mammal reptile similar to a cross between a dog and a wild boar, a distant ancestor of the current mammals that spread over the surface of the Pangaea. As life continued to evolve, new species emerged. Dinosaurs dominated the Earth during the entire Mesozoic period.